just breathe. Return to the breath, so to speak. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we will be doing the respiratory system down the way, but breathing is one of the most important things we do, and one of the things that we essentially do our whole life too. Correct? And very simply put, and we will get more into this when we get into the respiratory system, you have two balloons inside your lungs, two balloons that are your lungs inside your rib cage. And when your rib cage expands, or when the volume of your rib cage expands, it actually sucks those balloons open, and that draws air into them. And that's how you get air into your lungs, is you create a vacuum in your rib cage, which causes your lungs to expand. And so we are going to look at muscles today that expand your rib cage in general and help you breathe. They can also help contract your rib cage because that will push the air out. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a balloon filler. I'm not talking about where you put helium in the balloon and it fills the balloon up. I'm talking about you can actually put a balloon inside a bucket, and the bucket's got a vacuum on it, and it sucks the balloon open, and you can drop candy and confetti in there and things like that, and then seal it up. And that thing works really, really like how your lungs work, because that thing expands the area in there, and the balloon that's like your lung expands. And so we are going to, again, look at muscles that expand your rib cage or contract it to help you close it back down again. And there are there are actually five muscles that help you to breathe. The main one is the diaphragm. And if we look at Skelly here, I've got to actually, it's very appropriate here, I actually have to get through Mr. and Mrs. Skeleton's muscles here to get into the rib cage, right? But the most important breathing muscle, if you were ever asked by anybody what is the breathing muscle, if you need to come on in, you can come on in, my friend. Thank you. Sorry, gentleman's coming here to replace the batteries on our towel dispenser so we can wash our hands. Anyway, your main breathing muscle is your diaphragm, period. And it is a mushroom-shaped muscle. That's why I have this upside down bowl here. It is a mushroom-shaped muscle, or a little umbrella that actually sits up in your rib cage. Kind of like that. It's up here like that. And it's your main breathing muscle. And if you can imagine, it looks kind of like my hands look here. If my hands were to contract, but the origin insertion couldn't get closer to each other. Remember, when muscles contract, they pull the origin insertion closer to each other? Well, if the origin insertion is kind of like your rib cage, and this muscle is a dome when it's relaxed and it contracts, it's actually going to flatten. Because the distance over a dome is much longer than straight across. So when this muscle shortens, it flattens. Well, if you're up in the rib cage like this and you flatten, what happened to the volume up here? You just increased the volume of the rib cage. You just made a suction in there. So if we pull this down, if we flatten this out, it creates a suction in that rib cage and the lungs fill up. And that's why your diaphragm is your main breathing muscle. Now, we're going to look at the slides of this too, but I just think it's helpful to kind of see it in a three-dimensional thing. Yes, Ms. Creel, thank you. You're right. No, I want you to do it. Right there, and it flattens. Yes. Did you have a question, Ms. Creel? Please, talk to me.
The reason why I was doing it is because I was trying to imagine it. So the pulling is actually happening at the two ends instead, which causes it to flatten. Is that what I was understanding? Okay.
And maybe pulling is correct. But remember, muscles pull by shortening. Right? So if I've got this 6-inch rope and it shortens to a 4-inch rope, it's no longer going to be a bump. It's going to go flat. Right? If my fingers are like this and they shorten and the sides don't move, the only way to shorten is for them to go down. And when they go down, they create a vacuum. And that's what causes me to. So when I breathe in, I'm actually contracting my diaphragm. I'm actually shortening my diaphragm. When I breathe out, I'm just letting go. That's why it takes effort to breathe in. Breathe in right now. You have to hold that muscle, because if you just let the muscle go, you automatically let out. Breathing out just happens. Breathing out just happens. It actually takes effort to breathe in because we're contracting that muscle. Ms. Clayton, did you almost have a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it about? Yes. Yeah, it is why breath work is so important. It does work out that muscle. Yes, we can hear you. What's your question, ma'am?
Stop.
I think you stopped. I think you're good. Oh, maybe. Did you have a question, Miss Clayton?
No, sorry.
Okay. All right. So that's the diaphragm. And by the way, you could live your whole life without the other breathing muscles. Diaphragm does it. Diaphragm does 90% of the work. That's fine. Okay? It goes and gives me that breath in, and I let go and everything just kind of collapses again. But remember that the amount of air I can take into my body has a lot to do with how efficiently I can do other things. Very much like a car, by the way. Your cars suck in air all the time to burn gasoline. That's what they do. And if you want a more powerful car, you guys know a car with a turbocharger on it? Or a blower? Right? Turbochargers and blowers, in a way, don't put more gasoline in your car. What do they put more into your car? Air. Turbochargers are fans that force air into your engine. Blowers are powerful things that force air into your engine. Now, air doesn't burn on its own, but air mixed with fuel burns even better. And so if you can force more in there faster, you can explode faster and you can have a faster car. And the same thing is true with your body. So for normal breathing, my diaphragm does just fine. And you use your diaphragm all the time to breathe. But there are times when I'm breathing even faster. Yes, Mr. Jones, talk to me.
So, when I'm doing intense cardio, is that why your chest starts to burn?
Yeah.
Like, if you're really breathing heavy, it's a burning feeling, and I never thought about that, but it's a muscle.
Yeah, it's actually several muscles probably, sir, and that's the other 4 muscles. You have muscles between your actual ribs that are called the intercostals, and inter means what? Between, right? Intercostals, and you have, just like your obliques, just like your abdominals, you have internal and external intercostals that run diagonal like this. And they help to lift your ribs up and pull them back closed. Now, why would I want to close my ribs when I'm trying to breathe? Because if I want to breathe faster, I don't want to just breathe from my diaphragm relaxing. I might want to actually blow out faster, because if I blow out faster, I can suck in sooner. So it's fine just to breathe with my diaphragm and go, and just let it relax and let my breath out. But if I want to, because I'm running, I need to actually pull my ribs down. And so some of my intercostals can lift my ribs up and help my diaphragm lift my ribs up so I can breathe in stronger and faster, and some of my other intercostals help pull my ribs back together and breathe out faster. So I can use my internal and external intercostals to lift my ribs up and pull them back down. So I can do faster breaths. Diaphragm's still working, but I'm using my inner and outer intercostals, and they really do run diagonal like this. And by the way, who here likes ribs? I mean, to eat ribs. Delicious baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back ribs. Yeah, cool. Next time you're eating ribs, flip them over and look at them carefully. You will see that on one side, the meat is running diagonally this way, and on the other side, the meat is running diagonally that way, because cows and pigs have intercostals too. You are eating intercostal meat when you eat rib meat. It's exactly like it is in a personal. I've never eaten person rib meat, but I mean, it's exactly like it structurally speaking. And you can see it. You can actually see it. It's kind of cool. You flip them, you're like, oh, these are going diagonal, just like Tapscott told me. You flip it over, oh, these are going diagonal the other way. Those are the internal and external intercostal ribs, rib meat. So muscles, internal, external, intercostal muscles. And they help you to expand and contract your ribs when you're breathing really heavy. And that's part of the reason that Mr. Jones feels a burning sensation here, because those muscles are getting tired too from breathing so heavy. So he's got his diaphragm going. He's got his internal and external intercostals going. And then, do you guys remember the serratus anterior? The muscle that hooks to the scapula? It doesn't help you breathe. That's not why I'm bringing it up. But it's very interesting that it's not just called the serratus muscle. It's called the serratus anterior muscle. And anytime we say something like that, we know there's a serratus posterior. And there are. And again, I'm going to show you pictures of this stuff. This is a kind of preview of coming attractions and an overview. You've got serratus, you've got two sets of serratus posterior muscles. Two up top and two down below. And the ones up top, just like you might think, the ones up top help to elevate the ribs, which means they help me to breathe in, and the ones down below help to depress the ribs, pull them back down. So they too, like the intercostals, help me to breathe in and breathe out quickly. So sometimes you'll even get a stitch in your upper and lower back because of these muscles cramping on you from breathing really hard when you're running. So if these are the serratus posterior, what do we call the serratus posterior on top? Serratus posterior, Mr. Richards.
Inferior. Superior, serratus inferior and posterior and inferior, right? On top.
Yes, on top. You gave me an inferior answer.
Superior.
Thank you. Superior. Serratus.
Superior is top. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there is a serratus posterior superior, and there's a serratus posterior inferior. Yes. I just wanted all the names. So we've got a serratus anterior that has nothing to do with any of this. Has to do with moving the scapula around. But in back, we've got a serratus posterior superior, serratus posterior inferior. So that's your 5 breathing muscles. Your 5 breathing muscles. Number 1, when I say breathing, you should think diaphragm. And that sucker is inside your rib cage. It actually hooks to the inside of all your ribs and even your vertebrae back here. So it can even affect postural things, right? Not to mention that we have all sorts of important stuff running through the center of it. Yes, Ms. Rader, please.
Sorry, I think I might have missed one because you said 5 and I only got 4.
Because you're counting the intercostals as 1.
2. Okay.
Right, and by the way, I would too, Ms. Rader, but I was just being technical, and there's really an intercostal exterior, intercostal interior. But you're right, if I wasn't teaching a class, and I talked to a client, or even another massage therapist, and I wasn't teaching a class, I'd be like, your intercostals. Like, I'm not gonna be like your intercostal exterior, because you're rubbing both together, like they're so tiny. But I just want to point out they are different angles, because one helps to kind of lift up the rib cage, the other one helps to kind of pull it down, probably. They're not even 100% sure. Anyway, so that's your 5. 2 serratus posteriors, 2 intercostals, and a diaphragm. Yes, Mr. Richards, please.
Would you use the same method for them as in you do the other ones where you know, the internal and external? Is that the same way they're running?
They are running the same. I think they're running. I know what you mean. Are the external intercostals running this way and the internal intercostals running this way? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. Is it the same? Both the same kind of word?
Oh, it's the same word. Yes.
So would they be running the same direction as the obliques?
I think they are. I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if the diagonal one on the outside is going this way. I'm literally looking because I've never had anybody ask. Yes, they run the same direction. Yep.
Because that's a good way of knowing.
Yeah.
When they put your arms there and put
But it-
abdominals.
Yes, but unlike the abdominals, they don't help you to rotate, and you'll probably never need to know that level of detail. But you're absolutely right, sir. My external obliques do this, and my external intercostals do this. My internal obliques do this, and my internal intercostals do this. You're right. Right. Yep. Well said. Okay, so 5 breathing muscles. One actually helps create a vacuum inside my rib cage directly. The other ones help to expand my rib cage quickly, lift it up even more, and collapse it, depress it quickly so I can get breath out so I can breathe faster. And I tend to only use those when I am working really, really hard. I kick in the other 4 muscles, okay? Yay. And the diaphragm, I believe, has structural importance. I think the intercostals have structural importance, and you can massage the intercostals. You can take your hands and rub between people's ribs, very specifically. And you can manipulate people's ribs quite a bit. Rib cages really move a lot more than we give them credit for. Okay, let me show you guys some slides. Oh, Miss Carrillo, please, talk to me.
I was wondering, because I answered in the intercostals and I hadn't seen the serratus posteriors before. I was wondering if this also kind of affects your posture, because since the ribs attach to the vertebrae, and if it's tight, I wonder if like it just keeps those from freely flexing, not control it, but like it adds on to more reasons why you probably are leaning to the side.
100.
To the back side.
I 100% agree.
Okay.
I don't even kind of agree. I 100% agree that intercostals, internal and external intercostals, and the diaphragm could 100% affect postural issues or exacerbate them, make them worse. I 100% agree. Yeah, they definitely can be involved. And I have massage clients on purpose between their ribs because I felt that was part of the issue. Absolutely. And
Miss Rader massaged my knots, and I didn't notice until like when I got home afterwards that I go like this a lot. I'm leaning like this way, and that's why they're getting tight. So I just wondered. I basically wanted to confirm if that's like something.
Absolutely, 100%. And as you said, all your ribs are attached to your thoracic vertebrae, so they can affect your back directly, or your back can affect them. I don't know which came first, kind of thing, but absolutely. And I have addressed them in clients directly. So this is not one of those random things where I'm like, it could be. No, your intercostals are an important structural muscle. Absolutely. Miss Clayton, please.
Is there an easy way to massage them, like on yourself? Because I'm trying to massage them and I really can't get between my ribs. There's not a ton of space there for me.
Well, there's not a ton of space there for anybody, but it's actually just kind of hard to get all the way around, because what you want somebody to do is kind of start where they can find them and try to trace them all the way back to the spine, which is really hard to do because these are one of the last layers of muscle, right? So they're going to run into your lats, they're going to run into your serratus anterior, they're going to run into your iliocostalis and longissimus and spinalis. So it's actually much better to have somebody else do this. It's really hard to rub your own. You could rub a tiny section somewhere, but I agree with you. But for everybody, Miss Clayton, the space is not even the size of a finger. So you're feeling for that little divot, that little valley between 2 ribs, and then trying to kind of work it. So you're right.
Yeah.
It's very time consuming. I've only done it on clients where we really felt like that was part of the postural problem, but I have done it on many occasions. But I'm not doing it in a 60-minute massage on a regular massage. I'm not even usually doing it in a 2-hour massage in a regular massage. I'm doing it when somebody comes to me and like Miss Carrillo, they seem to be bent to one side. That seems to be part of the issue. Or they're telling me they're having a hard time breathing deeply. You do get that a lot. And having a hard time breathing deeply, everybody can feed on itself. So what happens is, if my ribs are a little bit contracted because of just stress, it's harder to take a deep breath, and I may not even be aware of that. I may not even be consciously aware of that, but I'm breathing a little bit shallow now, and that tends to make you feel a little anxious. Feeling anxious can make you breathe shallow, but breathing shallow can make you feel anxious. And then that can make you tighter and tighter and tighter. So I've had many, many clients come in, and these clients have, I'll say, they seem really tight in that area. I'll say, do you have a hard time taking a deep breath? And they'll go, Oh, I do. And you can tell it didn't even occur to them. But they're like, you're absolutely right. I really do. And then we try to work on this stuff to open back up their rib cage because it helps to tend structurally helps them, but it helps with the anxiety because your body follows your mind and your mind follows your body. That's very, very true. Yes. Miss Clayton, did you have more? By the way, I didn't mean to.
No, thank you. Are there like, does deep breathing help with that? Like, does
Sure.
that
Sure.
like stretch them out?
Yeah, I would think absolutely deep breathing would help with that. And as Miss Savarino pointed out, like those type of breathing exercises and stuff like that are really helpful. For expanding my rib cage and stretching it out and try to breathe deeper each time and such. Absolutely. And by the way, deep breathing probably has all sorts of other benefits. There is a lot of information to suggest that the diaphragm, as many of you said in your homework, actually massages the heart because the heart sits on top of the diaphragm, believe it or not. There is a lot of information to suggest that moving the diaphragm in a forceful manner like that helps to move your lymph along. So there's lots of advantages to deep breathing beyond some of the most amazing advantages, which is mindfulness and all that kind of stuff. Mr. Richards, you've had your hand up for a while, sir. What's on your mind?
If someone had asthma, would you do the intercostals?
Yeah.
Because then you can relax the
Yeah.
muscles around the rib cage.
Yeah.
So anything to do with breathing problems, that's where you want to
Yeah.
isolate.
Anyway, yeah. And by the way, that doesn't mean somebody comes in, they say they got asthma, I'm just going to start rubbing their ribs. But you're right. If they're complaining about a tight chest and things like that, or I see evidence of that, I'm going to look at the diaphragm, which you can't rub the diaphragm directly, but you can move the ribs to kind of affect the diaphragm. But I'm going to look at intercostals for sure. And I'm going to rub the back. When you rub the back, you're just going to hit the serratus posterior and inferior actually, automatically. But yes,
Sideline is more intercostals, isn't it?
sideline can help with intercostals. Yeah, they also
get them back on a sideline position.
Yeah, I also and they sell these tables too. I've always wanted to buy one, but they're like $8,000. They make these massage tables that articulate in the middle, and they're kind of like fancy chiropractic tables, and they're kind of cool because if somebody's face down, you can have it start lifting up their midsection so they're kind of teepeed on your table. But you can have them lay on their side, and it will bend them here, and that opens up their ribs, and then you start working through their ribs and stuff. So things like that you might want to think about because you can actually have somebody laying face down, and you can put their legs off to the left side of the table and their shoulder off to the left side of the table in the middle of their body to the right side of the table so they're curved, and use that to open up one side of their ribs and then start working the ribs between there. So you can have them on the table like this, laying face down, and start working them. You don't have to do any of that, but you can. Yeah, with hard to get muscles, everybody, I like to put them in a stretch and then try to work the muscles. If they're easy to get muscles, no problem, but ribs are really hard. As Miss Clayton said, they're hard to get in between. So if I get Miss Clayton kind of laying face down on my table but curved, now this side's open up and I'll start scraping through it basically. I'm not scraping, but massaging through it, and then bend her this way and start working through it too. That'll make a big difference. Thank you. Miss Savarino, you're going to mention something about the breath, I suspect.
Yes, just for Miss Clayton, I mean, there's so many different techniques, but the one that I did in Sedona, like, really open it up, and all you basically do is do, like, it's just in the mouth, but you do, like, deep as you can, and as deep as you, like, can, so, like, and you're, like, forcefully putting that out, and if you do that for, like, 3 minutes straight, you will feel, like that, and then you can also, like, once you inhale, if you hold it, and you like kind of squeeze that energy and you like force it to your brain because you're literally like pushing the cerebral spinal fluid everywhere. It's wild, and it's just like there's so many different techniques that you could do, and there's different breaths, and they all have different purposes, but they all work the muscle. It's just fantastic. And there's also, like you said, the great mindfulness and just what you feel as you release when you're doing that. It's just crazy.
Not to mention transcending space and time briefly.
No, honestly, like whenever we did that, because we did breath work for like 45 minutes straight, and we did like really intense, and like whatever came up for me came up, and you were able just to shake it out and release like our carnal energy, you know, just like moving it through. And then like we kind of like calmed our breath, and then like brought us back to center and like opened up the different spaces and the chakras and everything. It was just freaking wild. So I just highly recommend. It's really intense, but it's so beneficial because we work out every muscle in our body. So why not? What literally keeps us alive, our breath. So.
Yeah.
Will you
she does like, and I've talked to like the ladies from the retreat, and they said that like they go to different breathworks, and like the way that she does it is just like different. It's just, and I don't know, it's just surreal. So I'll definitely put it in the chat.
I love
Okay,
it.
thank you.
No worries.
Breath. Who'd have thunk? Miss Hendrickson.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering about, so like with exercise, you know, when you first, or like when you're new to exercise and you try to like do something that's pretty hard, you get like that stitch in your side and it's like you were saying, like your muscle, could be like tired, the diaphragm itself. So as you,
The stitch in your side could be your intercostals too.
okay, but like as you continue to exercise and it gets easier, like the same amount of, exercise gets easier, you don't, you know, you get more endurance. Is that like when the diaphragm gets stronger, are you taking more oxygen into your lungs? Is that like how that works, that you like improve your
Probably.
oxygen intake?
Probably, yeah. I mean, if you get more efficient at breathing and your diaphragm gets stronger, you're taking more oxygen. And the stitch could be due to lack of oxygen. It could be due to lack of blood too, because your cardiovascular system. One of the things that happens when we exercise is that we actually grow more efficient arteries to those muscles and such. And so our endurance goes up because we can get more fuel to them. That's kind of an oxygen issue, but it's kind of a blood issue too. And oxygen comes through the blood, but I mean, it could also be other things that are coming in the blood that are feeding that muscle. And that the stitches could be occurring just because those muscles aren't getting enough oxygen or getting enough glucose from the blood or whatever. But the irony of that happening to your breathing muscles is you want your breathing muscles to breathe better so they can get more oxygen to themselves, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question, yes, as you get more efficient, as you get better, your body gets better feeding those areas and you're less likely to get a stitch.
Yeah, and I had a coach who had this technique of breathing when you get a stitch, and he said that like you want to do more exhalation because sometimes you can have like a carbon dioxide buildup too.
Yes,
And so when you do like
I love that.
you can't breathe in as much.
I love that. Carbon dioxide stuff is actually, carbon dioxide, as I said, kills you. And a lot of the sensors in your body are actually not programmed to fill when you're low on oxygen. They're programmed to fill when you're high on CO2. And you're right, breathing out is very, very useful. And by the way, everybody, if you think about it too, the better you breathe out, the emptier your lungs are to take in new oxygen. If I take a deep breath, but only breathe part of it out, there's still some stale air in there that I now can't fill up on my next breath. So my efficiency of breathing out is just as important as my efficiency of breathing in. I want to dump out the bucket so I can fill it all the way back up again. Yeah. And that's where we come to intercostals and serratus posterior muscles, because they help me to breathe in and out much more efficiently to make sure I'm wringing out my lungs, because we've got to do this really big thing. Yeah. Miss Everson.
I was just curious if putting like one of those half round bolsters under your waist to get into the intercostals would be a good way of working it. Instead of having like a table that bends, just having like a pillow there that kind of bends for you.
Miss Everson, this is the type of experimentation that we really frown on in this class. I do not want you guys trying anything outside of exactly what I've prescribed. That's exactly what I want you doing. I want you to stick a chair under there, a couch, a bolster. That's brilliant. Honestly, I'm a very big believer in street smarts massage. And especially because you're going to get into a room with somebody and be like, I don't know, but I do know this and this. Let's stick a bolster under there. I think that's brilliant. Miss Everson, yes, I would try it today. I think it's brilliant. And that type of thinking, too, I really, really want to commend you on. That type of thinking is the type of thinking that massage therapists who train themselves have. And you can lock that type of a therapist in the room and they just figure stuff out over time. And they make a lot of mistakes, too. But they figure stuff out over time. And you see them a year later and you're like, where'd you learn all this stuff? And they're like, in my room. Like, I just figured it out. So, yes, keep thinking that way. Yes, do that. I love that idea. I love that. And by the way, how do you think the client feels when you do that too? Because they go to you this problem that they brought to other therapists. They're like, nobody's ever done that. Where'd you learn that? And you're like, I do it. And they're like, oh, and then they're like, oh, you're smart. And they love that. They love that. People love that. Yeah. I've had clients tell me that before, by the way. I've had clients be like, You did 3 moves that nobody else has ever done on me, and I've had lots of massage. They're like, they assume that makes me better. That may not actually, but they assume it. So that kind of stuff is awesome. Helps the client and makes you look knowledgeable. I love it. Mr. Jones.
So I was just gonna say, like, with high-level athletes, to answer Ms. Hendrickson, they wear those breathing masks, which technically make it harder to breathe, just by a little bit. So once you take the mask off, then your muscles are expecting that same resistance. And I would guess you're definitely gonna take in more oxygen, or at least quicker.
Kind of like a weighted vest,
Yes, totally.
right?
Yep.
Exactly. So we go hiking with a weighted vest. I used to know this guy. Oh my gosh, when I was growing up, this guy that would go like hiking with like a tree trunk on his shoulders. He was a ginormous human being. But obviously, when he took the tree trunk off his shoulders, he would zoom up the mountain, right? And yes, it's the exact same thing, sir. They're right. They are trying to make it harder for those muscles to suck in and suck out, so that when they remove that thing, they're that much stronger and it's easy peasy. Yep.
Yep.
Well said. Great example. And it's what you're doing in the gym. Like, why move hunks of metal around? That makes no sense at all. You're making it difficult on yourself on purpose. In fact, every day when Mr. Jones goes to the gym, he's literally trying to do the exercise as strict as possible to make it as ridiculously hard as possible. In a way, he doesn't want to use more weight. He actually wants it to just be harder on his body. And so everything is about actually trying to tax your body on purpose, when we do massage, we do the opposite. When I'm massaging a client, I'm trying to make things easy on my body because I got to do a lot of these, right?
Yep.
Well
And
said.
it's funny about the weight thing is you don't actually need heavy weights at all. You could use 10-pound dumbbells for everything and still get amazing results.
Yes. 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 Really quickly, I used to work out all the time, believe it or not, and I was a young kid working out and using too much weight, and one of the powerlifting champions in my state was working out literally next to me. Really nice guy, and not a preachy guy. And we were doing curls, and I've got all this weight on this bar, and he's using half as much weight as me. And this guy is ginormous and powerful. And all he did was look over at me, and he's in perfect form, and I'm sitting there throwing my body around and doing everything wrong, and he's just there. He looked over, he smiled, looked back over, and I watched him. And after just about a minute, I went, "Oh, it was a great life lesson." I realized, to get that powerful doesn't take weights; it takes form. And best life lesson I ever had when it comes to working out. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Form and focus.
Form and focus. Yeah, it's all about form. Yeah, Mr. Craven.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something about like how crazy important like breathing is. You don't have to think about it, but like I remember I looked into a lot of like breathing work like a while ago, and just how like every little facet of like how you breathe can affect like your physiology. Like as far as like where your tongue is in your mouth, like that can affect your whole facial structure, how you sleep at night, how you breathe. Like, is your mouth open? Do you breathe through your mouth? Do you breathe through your nose? Like every little tiny detail has a huge effect on like literally how you look. Like you can tell a lot about somebody just by looking at them, how they breathe, like everything. So it's crazy.
Yeah, true. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Very complex stuff, and it affects all the other systems of the body, right? So that tells us the importance. This is actually a great discussion because it tells us the importance of the 5 muscles that I'm about to show you slides about, right? So we just kind of talked about the overview. I'm just going to show you some slides here. They're going to make perfect sense now because you actually have a pretty good idea where these muscles are. So let me share this with you. Boom, boom. All right. Okay. So we've got our lovely back. We're going to go down some levels here. And as we go down these deeper levels, you can start to see stuff like the serratus posterior muscle. This is down pretty deep, where we've got the serratus superior, posterior superior, and serratus posterior inferior here. Notice, by the way, conveniently, they run on top of the spinal erectors, which means you've been rubbing them all along. They also mean that they are another muscle that massage therapists tend to rub up and down the back on, and they think they're hitting knots. And what they're really doing is running across these diagonal muscles, these serratus posterior and serratus posterior superior and serratus posterior inferior. Now, without even looking at your book, what would happen if the serratus posterior superior contracted? What would happen to your ribs if these muscles shorten that are running kind of diagonal down here? Miss Rader, please.
They would pull up.
Yes, and what do we call it when we pull up? What happens to your ribs?
They elevate.
Thank you. They create an elevation of your ribs. And Mr. Richards, God love you. I love what he did. He went, yeah, I want that feeling. That's what massage therapists need to be, three-dimensional kind of feeling like, they do this, Tap Scott. Yes, that's exactly right. They elevate your rib cage, but more importantly, they do this. Beautiful. And so what would the serratus posterior inferior do that are down like this? Yeah. Mr. Richards said it best. They depress the rib cage, right? This is the beauty about understanding that muscles only contract. You don't need to read that in a book. You don't need to memorize it. Once you know they run like this, you go, oh, they grab the ribs and pull them down, right? So when I am inhaling forcefully, my diaphragm contracts and my serratus posterior superior lifts my rib cage up. And when I'm blowing out really hard, the posterior inferior pull my ribs down and my diaphragm relaxes. Cool. Moving right along. Let's look at the diaphragm. Now it looks in this picture like a ball inside your rib cage. Remember, it's not a ball, it's an umbrella in there. It's an umbrella in there. It's the bowl of soup that I put inside the thing, right? It attaches around the inner surface of the ribs and some of the lumbar vertebrae. Does that mean it could have something to do with back problems? No, there's no way. Never mind. Just ignore that. That's not important. Okay. And it hooks to the sternum. So it actually attaches my rib cage to my lumbar area and all my ribs together, right? And they tell you the insertion for this muscle is the central tendon. This is very confusing. The central tendon is just the center of this dome. And it is kind of gristly there. There really is a tendon there. But it's not a tendon like you normally think about that's attached to bone. It's just the top of the dome. It doesn't have an insertion in the normal sense. What's important later, though, is we're going to find out that the sac around your lungs attaches to that central tendon. So when this diaphragm comes down, the sac around your lungs comes down and your lungs expand. But it's not a tendon attached to a bone. It's just like the gristly part of the center of this muscle. So really, the origins are the insertions for this muscle, if you think about it, right? Because it's around a circle. The circle is your ribs and your lower back and your sternum and all that stuff. And so it's all an origin. It's all an insertion. The real important part is it shrinks and comes down, and thus that central tendon comes down, which the central tendon could just be the center of the dome. Don't overthink it. And it pulls down the sac around the lungs open up and you breathe. It's beautiful. But remember, this is an umbrella. It really is an umbrella. It's a mushroom, a giant mushroom inside the ribs that then flattens when it contracts. That's it. And yes, it really could have something structurally to do with your low back stability and everything, because it does attach there. I was being a smart ass. Please, it's actually very important. It's an amazing muscle. Please ignore me when I say stuff like that. Everything's important. I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't important. This muscle's incredible. Miss Severino just told us how important it was to enlightenment to breathe. Come on, people. Stick with me here. Okay, moving right along. All right, this is very weird, but as though I was laying on the floor and looking up at the skeleton, right? So yes, as creepy as it is, if you were standing and I was laying on the floor looking up your clothes or whatever, which I would never do, but if I was looking, this is what I would see if you didn't have skin and all sorts of stuff in my way. So this just gives you an idea of this muscle hooking to the ribs, and this, you're looking at the inside of the mushroom up there. But what I love about this picture is, do we notice the quadratus lumborum and the psoas major and these back muscles that are intimately attached here, and how it hooks into the spine here? And by the way, look at that hole there where the muscle is not there, it's on hiatus. This is the esophageal hiatus where your esophagus comes down because your stomach is underneath here, right? This is the vena cava, which is where your venous return comes to your heart, yeah? And this is your abdominal aorta. All the blood for your lower body comes through this sucker right here. All the blood right there. So all this has to kind of pass through the diaphragm. Very cool. Very cool muscle. Okay. Now, you can reach under the ribs and touch a little bit of the origin of this muscle. I find that's actually rather difficult to do, but you can. But the other thing you can do is just move people's rib cages around. People's rib cages are actually highly flexible, and moving them around while they're breathing helps to stretch this muscle out and loosen it up. I like to have people take a big breath and try to hold their ribs up as they let out to kind of stretch out their diaphragm. And I will come into, I don't think I'll have time today because I got to go to Washington, but I will come into your class and push on your ribs that way. Yes, Mr. Singletary, please.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The central tendon, well, the rib cage, are they sitting on top of this, the central tendon, or are they attached, or are they just sitting on top of one another?
I don't know what you mean about they sitting on top.
Like the previous picture that you had, it shows the rib cage is on top of the central tendon. Are they attached? Not that one.
I'm trying to go back.
Yes, that one.
No, there's no attachment. They cut out ribs just so you can see them. That thing is it's just a balloon inside your, like a half moon thing inside your body. The central tendon is just a gristly like tendon in the center of this dome.
Okay.
I'd almost rather you forget about it in a way, just because really this thing is just a mushroom like this, or an umbrella that just flattens. And really all, in my opinion, all of its origins and insertions should be considered to be the ribs and the low back and stuff on the inside. It's attached in a ring around you, which is why it looks like that. The central tendon, sir, to give you an idea, let me see if I can point to it here, hold on. The central tendon would be here. You can't see it in this picture, but it'd be here. It's attached to a sac for your lungs. All the actual attachments to bone are around the outside edge of it, which are the ribs and stuff.
Okay.
I hope that helped.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that is the diaphragm. It's so amazing, so amazing. And that leads us to the intercostals, the external intercostals, that is Mr. Richards taught us, run in the same direction as the external obliques. And the intercostals, and by the way, from now on, guys, you honestly could just remember that they're the intercostals. I don't think people ever break those two down. But it's kind of neat to know they run in two things here. And this person doing this with their fingers is exactly what I do to them when I'm trying to loosen somebody up, although I usually do it when they're face down. It just works better for me. And I like Miss Everson's idea too. Put a bolster in there and have them lay on their side to kind of open up one side of the ribs and try to work them out that way. Absolutely brilliant. They're very confusing about how they talk about the origins and insertions in here. Because they're like, well, the origin is the inferior border of the rib above, and the insertion is the superior border of the rib below. So they're saying they hook to the bottom part of the rib above it, and they hook to the top part of the rib below it. They could have just said they're between the ribs, because they're between the ribs. So I almost don't want you to put that in your brain, because of course they attach to the bottom of the top rib and the top of the bottom rib. They're between the ribs. It's just a very fancy, confusing way to say that. Okay? And they believe that the external ribs help to elevate, pull up the ribs and expand them, and the internal ones help to deflate them, help to depress the ribs. Boom, and help with exhalation. So now we know that when I breathe in really hard, I, number one, always contract my diaphragm. I also take my posterior superior, serratus posterior superior muscles to lift up my ribs while my diaphragm's coming down. And I also use my external intercostals to lift up my ribs. So I got 3 muscles helping me to lift up my ribs and expand them really quickly because I'm running right now. Diaphragm contracts, serratus posterior superior contract, external intercostals contract. But now I've got to get all this air out of here really quick because I want to take another breath and I want to get all the air out so that I have a completely empty lung so I can do this again. All I can do with the diaphragm is just relax it. I let go of that. My serratus posterior inferiors pull my ribs back down. And my internal intercostals pull my ribs back together. And so I got, which is a lot different than when I just use my diaphragm, which is, when I just let my diaphragm go, the exhalation is actually quite slow. It takes a long time, even with my mouth wide open. But if I use these other muscles, and that's what they're for. This is one of those features you're glad you're not in class for because I just spit all over the camera. So, anyway, that is your 5 breathing muscles. Here are the serratus posterior superior. Here's the serratus posterior inferior. You can see from the angles they run what they do. They do have true origins and insertions. The origins are on the spine because that's what's going to stay still. The insertion is on the ribs because that's what moves. And so you've got the origin of C7 to like T3. I think that's 4 spinous processes, and it goes down to 4 ribs. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. 4 spinous processes, 4 ribs. Your body's pretty smart, kind of does that. The bottom does something very similar. Hooks to T12, L1, L2, L3, and goes up to your last 4 ribs, 12, 11, 10, 9, and helps to pull those down. Yeah? Yeah. Cool. And I think that about covers them. These are palpatable in the sense that you probably rubbed over them accidentally all the time. And to be honest with you, when I have somebody having a problem with breathing, I work their intercostals and I rub their back, kind of knowing that I'm going to hit these muscles anyway. A couple of other things to show you just really fast because they're in this section and they're actually really good to know, but they don't have anything to do with breathing. But I really want you to look at this picture really briefly here of the ligamentum nuchae. When you guys first started class, we mentioned the ligamentum nuchae. It is a ligament that attaches essentially the occipital protuberance, right, in the back of your head to the spinous process of C7. And that's true. We didn't lie to you. But this is a much better picture of what it really looks like. It's not just a rope coming from this bump down to this spinous process. It actually feeds back into all of them. It's like a ribbon going back into all of these. This is one of the reasons why your neck's so stable and you don't have to be that careful with necks. This ligamentum nuchae is not just a rope. That's what we feel up here. That's what his fingers feel. But it actually feeds back into all of this stuff. It's filling in those spaces. It's like a ribbon going into the neck all the way down. And I just want to show you a picture of that because it really, it just really shows you a more true picture, I guess is what I'm trying to say, of a ligamentum nuchae. And I thought that was significant. The other stuff I wanted to show you really quickly, not the abdominal aorta. You will sometimes hear people hear about the supraspinous ligament. There's actually a ligament that runs down your whole spine. There's the thoracolumbar aponeurosis. You already know about that. I also want to just point out that there's all these ligaments between your vertebrae, loads of ligaments and little joints between the joints and all this type of stuff. You guys have ligaments going everywhere. You don't need to know the names of these. You don't need to remember them. I just want to point out that there are ligaments going everywhere, that every place inside your body is filled with connective tissue. We've been studying the muscles, but part of the thing that gives your back so much stability and such is all the ligaments that tie everything together. And so I just thought these were good pictures in this section to show you all the extra connective tissue that fills in all of these areas. Again, doesn't have anything to do with breathing, but it's towards the end of this chapter and it kind of came up here and I left them in because I was like, yeah, super cool stuff. More ligaments. You have ligaments upon ligaments upon ligaments.